Hello and welcome to another episode of Partyless. I'm your host, Anna Sudberry, and today we are going to be talking about Iran. This has been in the news a ton in the past several weeks, and of course, years before that, and decades before that, and a century before that. And it's a very long story. It's an interesting one, but I wanted to cover that today so that we can figure out what's going on today. What are the protests that are going on in Iran? How did they start? What is the U.S.'s involvement with this? Why are we involved in another Middle Eastern country? And just what's happening there. So we're going to cover it from start to finish. Let's get into it. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, I'm going to cover some basic facts about the country of Iran so that we know what we're dealing with. So the official name is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Its location is in Western Asia. It borders Iraq, Turkey, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan. The capital is Tehran. We'll be talking about that a lot. That's where the protests are going on today. The government type now is a theocratic republic. So you have a supreme leader and a president. But of course, the supreme leader trumps the president in all things. The official language is Persian or Farsi, and the currency is the Iranian rial. The population is about 92 million. But of course, the United States is way bigger. Median age is about 33 years old. Major religion is Shia Islam. So that's 90% of the country is Islamic. I would have thought it was 100%. So that's surprising. But they do have about 300,000 to 400,000 Christians in their population. They actually have a small recognized minority of Jews. They actually have 8,500 Jews there, which is very shocking. And then they've got some other religions, very tiny. But it is illegal to convert from being Muslim to any other religion. And it is illegal to evangelize Muslims. So that's why everybody's a Muslim, or yeah, you're probably going to get murked. And its GDP is ranked 34th globally. So this is a pretty big place. This is a happening place. And the main sectors are, of course, oil and gas. Okay. So now that we've got that out of the way, we're going to talk about Iran's conflicts dating back to 1901. And 1901 is where we're going to start this. I have my notes here mainly because there's a bunch of names that are very difficult to pronounce, and I want to make sure that I'm getting a century and a half correct of all of the things that have been going on in this place called Iran. So, everything always starts with oil. Have you noticed that? Because I've noticed that. Everything always starts with oil, and that's the story here in Iran. So way back in the day, Iran was called Persia. So our story starts in 1901, where you have a weak monarchy. And in 1901, they signed a deal with the Brits. There was a British man named William Darcy. He signed a deal that was going to create something called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. And he wanted to ensure that if there was any oil that was going to be found, he and his company were going to create the infrastructure in Iran and be able to take the profits. So that's exactly what happened. Oil was discovered in 1908, so 7 years after he signed this 60-year deal. They discovered the oil, and it pretty much immediately gave Britain complete control of this oil. So they promised the Iranian government 16% of the profits. So the Brits were going to keep everything else, and they were going to give Iran 16%. But what really ended up happening is Iran only got about 11 to 14%. And that sounds like a miserably small amount, and it kind of was. But according to other sources at the time, this wasn't necessarily super bad of a deal for Iran. But of course, as you can imagine, you've got the British coming into this country. They are signing a deal for the next 60 years. Any of this amazing oil and potential riches are going to go straight to their country, and there's only going to be a tiny pittance that's going to be left for the Iranians, which of course is going to lead to anger, resentment, and just not great feelings about the West. So that's where our story begins. So then you're going to fast forward to 1925. There is a man named Reza Shah Pahlavi, and he overthrows the previous administration, and he becomes the king. So Shah is like the word for king. He takes power. He wants to modernize. So he loves Western things. He loves modernity. He wants to bring railroads. He wants to bring all kinds of cool technology. And he wants to centralize the state. So this weakens the clerical power. So a cleric meaning like all of the religious people, all of the Islamic leaders He's weakening their power and control, and he's wanting to make it modern and just kind of like the West, where we don't really have a religious leader that's in charge of our country. We have all kinds of different things going on, and he wanted that as well. So in 1935, he officially renames Persia Iran, and that's just, it's supposed to be a statement of national identity and super cool, awesome, good things, and you can imagine that that also probably made a lot of people angry who were resistant to change. So he's ambitious, his authoritarian style and Western-friendly policies make everyone angry, and the traditionalists are starting to chafe under this management style, shall we say. So now we get to World War II, and Iran is neutral, and the Allies are not impressed. They're getting angry. They want you to be on their side or on no side at all. And the Reza Shah is showing signs of sympathy to Germany. He has some Nazi sympathies. He's seeming a little suspicious. He's acting a little strange, and they are having none of it. So since Iran is strategically critical as a supply corridor to the USSR, they hatch a plan. So the British, of course, have this massive oil stake, and the USSR is like, well, we need to get supplies, and we need Iran to do it. So they decide to invade, and they invade Iran. And they force the Shah, Reza Shah, to abdicate. They're like, get out, you're done. We can't have you as a liability, but we'll take your son. So his 21-year-old son ascends the throne and becomes the new Shah. And they exile the old Shah, Reza Shah, and he dies in exile in South Africa in 1944. So pretty soon after, just a couple years after. All right, so one of the tough things about this long tale is that the people in this story have very similar sounding or identical names. So we have Reza Shah the father, and we have Mohammad Reza Shah the son. He is a different breed. He has been educated in Switzerland. He is mega Western. So we had a guy that was pretty Westernized. Now the second Shah is super Westernized. He wears a suit all the time, just like his dad. He speaks perfect English with a British accent. He loves all things West, and he wants to make sure that his country of Iran is pretty much just like America or England or any of the other Western countries. So he starts changing a bunch of things. He is very secular, so he is not religious. He believes that women can vote and run for office, makes those changes. Western fashions embraced in all the cities. So if you look at pictures from this time of Iran, it is shocking. Everybody looks like Jackie O. I mean, the women just look totally Westernized. They're wearing Western clothes. Think of any, 1960s Halloween costume, and that's what the people look like they're wearing. And he relies heavily on U.S. and British support. So he's basically propped up by these Western countries. So all of the people who are religious or who value tradition or any of those things, they do not like this. They are starting to hate the West. They already hate the West because the British have taken their oil, and meanwhile, this entire time, they're getting all of this money, and Iran is getting pretty much none of it. And so the Shah doesn't care. He's propped up and in power basically because of England and our CIA. So because of this, he starts having conflict with the religious leaders who are starting to rise. And that leads us to the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini. Oh, this guy. Okay, so backstory of this dude is pretty interesting. So when he was 5 months old, he was just a baby. His father was killed under suspicious circumstances, and he always blamed Reza Shah. Ayatollah Khomeini always blamed the dad who abdicated for his father's death. He just believed that he had something to do with it, and he hated Western influence because of it. He became a Shiite cleric, so he hates anything secular. He always is reading his religious texts. He's off in a corner. He's not making friends. He's one of 6 children. He is just reading his little books and making sure that he is known as just the most religious dude that you could ever imagine in your life. So he is advocating for Iran to return to Islamic guidance. He wants none of these Western clothes. He wants none of the fun women voting situation. He wants total Sharia law. And of course, everybody's heard of Sharia law. It's bad. It's terrible. You have no rights. Women are nothing. You are basically chattel and a slave to your husband. So we're not about that. We don't want that at all. So He is pro that, and he's eventually causing so many problems for the current Shah that he is eventually exiled to Iraq, then he's exiled to France, and he is continuing to gain prominence. People just love this guy. So even in France, people are just treating him like he's a genius. You've got a bunch of writers and poets in France who are into this. He is kind of keeping it on the down low how insane he truly is and his real policies and what he's wanting to actually pass. And so people just think, oh, he's going to give Iran its independence. And we have this Shah who's basically under the thumb of England, under the thumb of the American CIA, and we could have our own, independent nation. And so they're just kind of ignoring all of his really ridiculous religious ideas that are horribly toxic. So it got to the point that the Shah kind of was swinging too far into secularism. So he actually banned veils. So that was a big deal when he did that, because it meant that religious women felt that they couldn't even go out because they weren't allowed to wear their hijabs and their other religious items of clothing. And they felt like they were going out naked. And so they had to be confined to their homes. So if you were part of like a really religious family, then you were basically a prisoner in your home, because he banned completely the wearing of these veils. So obviously what he should have done is just go somewhere in the middle. You don't have to wear it, but you can wear it if you want to. Well, that didn't happen. And of course that infuriated everybody even more. So they already feel like they're not independent. They are having their religion banned, basically, the religious clothing. So they're made to feel like they aren't allowed to practice that religion. And he's just starting to torture people who are dissenting. So he's throwing people in prison. He is allowing no dissent at all. He is exiling people. He's murdering people. And it's just not a great regime. But of course, the CIA and the Brits love it because he's super sympathetic to the West. And they're whining and dining him. He's flying to America. He is riding with JFK in his car. We are having parades for him. And the CIA is like, yes, we love this guy. We're going to let him just do whatever he's doing. Who cares, as long as he lets us have whatever we want. So meanwhile, Khomeini is biding his time. He's super angry, and he's whipping up the country into a frenzy against Western sentiment, America, England. It's becoming a problem. So then we get to 1951, and this was a big year. So this was the year that the prime minister, because remember, they have their leader, and then they have a prime minister or president. So they had a prime minister while we had the Shah, and his name was Mossadegh, and he decided that Iran should control its own oil. So he's like, nope, we're done. We're kicking England out. And he nationalizes the oil industry. He expels British personnel. He's done. And he creates the National Iranian Oil Company. And of course, England is not too happy about this. They've had a great gig, basically taken all this money all this time. And to be fair, they did create the infrastructure. It didn't exist, but that was a long time ago now. That's been about 50 years. So I think it's only fair, although the 60 years is timing out. They are like, no, we're taking this back. So England is mad, and Britain hits back with an embargo. So that an embargo is like a stop sign, and the Iranian economy collapses. So the Shah briefly flees. The U.S. starts to fear Soviet interference and influence, and things are getting pretty ugly and bad. But at least they have their oil, so that's a plus. So then in 1953, the American CIA decides to step in. And as we know, that doesn't always end well. So they started to do an operation called Operation Ajax. This is where the U.S. and Britain overthrow Mossadegh, which, does regime change sound familiar to you? Because I feel like I've heard about that before. Yes. So they decided to do a regime change. They were like, oh, this guy's going to take the oil and he's going to potentially have any interference from the USSR. Well, he's got to go. So they overthrow Mossadegh and they restore the Shah. And of course, Mossadegh was supposed to be limiting the Shah's power. Well, goodbye. He's gone. He's imprisoned. And now the Shah is just going to rule again with unlimited power. So the tactics they used were pretty brutal. See if any sound familiar. They paid mobs. CIA paid mobs. They did propaganda campaigns. They bribed politicians and military officers loyal to these people. So in the outcome, the Shah gained near absolute power, and our CIA even helped him create a secret police that was trained by the CIA, basically to ensure that they would have control over Iran for the foreseeable future. Now remember, we are America. We're just minding our own business. We are trying to live our lives. We're paying taxes. And this is what's going on secretly abroad. Our money is being taken and it's being given and used to pay bribes and regime change and all these things. Now, our government can justify all they want why insert whatever country's regime change is critical to our national security. It's a tale as old as time, and that's why you need to be informed so that you can make the decision for yourself if you feel that they're telling you the truth. And that is the key point of all of this. Do you think your government is telling you the truth? Are you going to allow them to continue to do this? So whenever you hear regime change, we need to do this, we have to do this for our security, think about, is this over oil? Is this about money? Who's getting the money? And if you're not getting the money and you see no betterment of your life, then somebody's getting the money and your tax dollars are being used to do regime change that's not going to actually help you. So think about that. Okay, so because of this happening in 1953, the people who had elected their prime minister, they had elected Mossadegh, and they did not like the Shah. They have now watched that whenever they try to get out from under American or British control, that it doesn't matter what they want, they're going to watch as the West basically swoops in and does whatever they want, and they are nothing. Now, like them or hate them, I mean, that's a pretty hopeless feeling. So then we come to the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Now, this is the most key thing that happened in their history, and it is pretty much what led to everything else and everything else that's happening today. So by the late 1970s, Iranians are fed up. They are done. They have had enough. They don't like the Shah's authoritarianism. So he's throwing people in jail. He is not letting them do anything. If you want to wear your religious veils, you're not allowed. There's corruption. There's foreign interference. He's still being wined and dined in America. And the social reforms, we and Western people would agree, these are great. Like, why are you guys complaining? You have women voting. You have Western dress. But this is angering conservatives. And I use the word conservatives. It's not the same thing at all. I mean, it kind of is, because you have the liberal women. So I guess what we would call liberal women in Iran, they are actually protesting. This is kind of hilarious because these women are the same wherever you go in the world, I guess. The liberal women there were angry that they were being told that they were not allowed to wear their religious veils. So they started wearing them. Keep that in the back of your mind, okay? They're wearing them as a sign of protest. They're wearing hijabs as a sign of protest. So, suddenly, everything's coming to a head. Khomeini has been living in Paris, this whole time. He's been absent and in exile for 14 years because the Shah was like, oh, I'm going to kill you. And then everyone was like, please don't. And he was like, fine, you can just go to Paris and be exiled. And then the Shah's gaining in power this whole time, which nobody expected. So, basically, they're super fed up. The monarchy collapses. And the Islamic Republic of Iran is born. Khomeini comes back. The Shah flees. He's done. He's gone. Iran is now under the control of Khomeini. And Khomeini, remember, he is a super conservative Ayatollah. So that's like the highest level you can possibly get in Islam. So he is, wearing religious clothing. He basically is like, we're going to completely rule this country according to the Quran, our religious texts. It's Sharia law. Women, guess what? You have no rights. You are done. You can't do anything. And you better be wearing religious clothing, and you're not allowed to sing. You're not allowed to dance. You're not allowed to do anything. So right after this happens, he comes back, overthrows the Shah, because everybody was super done with this guy in the first place. They were marching in the streets, very similar to what you're seeing today. That's what they were doing, and it just kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going until they overthrew him. There's a lot more. This is a very high-level explanation of what's going on. If you lived through this, I would love to see some comments from you. If you remember this happening on the news, this would have been 1979, so not many of you would have been alive for that. And remember, what I'm doing is synthesizing history from the perspective of as many people as I can get, because the truth is always somewhere in the middle. So history is written by the victors, and I don't want to just read history created by the CIA, because obviously they're not going to tell the whole truth about what they did and their part and their role in this. So you have to find all the perspectives that you can get. That's why you should be partyless. So right after this happens, it's 1979 to 81. Basically, Iran, they were triggered. They were freaked out. They were afraid of another takeover by America or any kind of intervention from the West. So they were coming off of 80 years basically of being controlled by the West. So they're like, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. We want to send a message. So a bunch of students, of course, it's always the students, some revolutionary students stormed the American embassy in Iran, and they kidnapped 52 Americans and held them hostage for 444 days. That is an incredibly long time. They did not kill anybody, but they did do mock executions. They had a bunch of psychological abuse. They did horrible things. And we tried to get them back on multiple occasions. And this is what a lot of people have heard about for many, many years, the Iran hostage crisis. So this was under President Jimmy Carter, and he went down as like one of the worst presidents ever, exclusively because of this. So in April 1980, after months of failed diplomacy to try to get these people back, Jimmy Carter authorized Operation Eagle Claw. This was going to be a daring rescue. It was going to be amazing. We were going to show that they can't mess with us. We're going to get our hostages back. And it was the biggest fail and national embarrassment ever. So the plan was originally that they were going to fly 8 MH-53 helicopters and several C-130 planes into the Iranian desert near Tabas. So they were going to meet at a remote staging area, refuel, and then infiltrate Tehran. Sounds exciting, right? This sounds like we're going to get them back. We're going to get 52 people back. This is a big mission. You're going into enemy territory, completely ruled by the Ayatollah, and you're going to get your people back. They were going to rescue the hostages and fly them to safety, ultimately evacuating them with the Air Force. But April 24th, 1980, there was a bunch of disasters. So you first had mechanical failures. Several of the helicopters malfunctioned. There were only 5 that were even left operational, which was less than they needed to get, 52 people out. And there was the desert storm. So a sandstorm just happened to show up and made it so that nobody could see anything. And then this is so bad, there was a collision. One helicopter collided with a transport aircraft on the ground, and it killed 8 servicemen. That was a horrendous tragedy. So not only are they trying to go and rescue people that Jimmy Carter's been unable to get out of Iran this entire time, but now you have 8 servicemen died for nothing, and it destroyed all of the equipment. So the mission was in chaos, and the rescue was aborted. How devastating. How embarrassing. It was a major embarrassment for the Carter administration, so everybody knew about it. Emboldened the Iranian hostage takers because they were like, wow, even with the might of your military, you can't get anything done. And it contributed to him losing to Ronald Reagan. So in 1980, Ronald Reagan won, and this is petty. They released the hostages the same day that Reagan was inaugurated. So, after all of that with Carter, they just released the hostages finally right after Reagan was inaugurated, and that was mediated by the Algiers Accords. I would love to hear from you if you lived through this and you saw this unfolding on TV, if you have any information for me, because living through history is a lot different than reading about it later. So let me know how that was and what the feeling was in America at that time. And, I'm surprised that they admitted it. I'm surprised that they admitted they'd even done this. If I were them, I would have kept it hush hush. And so I'm intrigued by that. So tell me in the comments what you think about that. So, terrible. But now let's go back to the overall conflicts in Iran and how we are involved. So keep in mind, yes, we're having protests today. We are only in 1980. And think about how involved we've been in this whole fiasco and situation and just ridiculousness. So now we're in the Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988. So basically, we are now angry at Iran and we want revenge. So have you heard of a guy named Saddam Hussein? Well, he invades Iran. And guess what? We help him. We're like, great, you want to invade? Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so we are going to give you whatever you need. So the U.S. backs Iraq indirectly, and Israel and Israel was created in 1948, so they've been kind of on the sidelines here. And now, of course, they are super opposed to all of this stuff. They really don't like Islam. And don't get me wrong, I am not a fan of Islam. Like I said, it's a false religion. It's evil. It's oppressive. It's horrible. It should be eradicated from the face of the earth. I am a Christian. I'm not going to apologize for that. I am not going to say we should be tolerant of all religions. I'm very intolerant of other religions. Super intolerant. everyone should repent. Everyone should turn to Jesus Christ. I'm not going to say sorry. That's my religion. That's my faith. And if I didn't hold that position, I'm a really bad Christian. So all Christians should hold that view of religious intolerance. We do not support your religion. We do not want your religion to thrive and do well. We want you to turn to Christ, period. So welcome to the fold. Anyone can repent. Anyone can turn to Jesus. Please do. We're waiting for you. He's waiting for you. You'd be wise to do so. So Saddam Hussein invades Iran and we're backing him. 1 million people die. So here we are again involving ourselves with U.S. tax dollars in a place in the Middle East, and we're making up all sorts of reasons of why we need to do that, and you can believe them, you can disbelieve them, but I'm an anti-interventionist. I want us to take care of our own country. If our country was a perfect utopia, sure, let's look at other places and see how they can benefit us or whatever, but that's not the case, and it's never been the case. So why are we involving ourselves, and who's getting rich? They can tell you, oh, we're going to seize all this oil. If you don't get richer, it wasn't for your benefit. Like, get real. So, lessons for Iran again. They are learning proxy warfare. They're learning that the West will stop at nothing, that we are going to help their enemies. I mean, they really are learning to hate and despise us, which I can't blame them. So that goes on for 8 years. Horrible. After that, we decide that we don't like Saddam Hussein because he invades Kuwait. And so we're like, oh, that's a step too far. And suddenly we're anti-Saddam and it's ridiculous after funding him and all. It's a horrible disaster. So, but we got to stick to Iran. Like I said, this is high level. I could go into each one of these wars, these proxy wars, these topics and talk for hours. But for the sake of this episode is simply about what's going on in Iran today and how were we involved. So I gotta keep moving. Okay, so now we're on to the Gulf War and the U.S. invasion of Iraq. That was 1990 to 2003. So the Gulf War, that was 1990 to 1991. Iran was watching U.S. military might, which, yay, they're watching us. We're so brave and big. In 2003, we invade Iraq. We're claiming there are weapons of mass destruction, terrorism links. We know how that went. Of course, a couple years before that, we had the World Trade Center attacks. That was obviously not related to Iran, but it was setting the stage to have us really be frightened of Islam, which you should be. It's a horrible religion. It's a horrible, toxic, evil religion. Most terrorists are Islamic. It's not the religion of peace. It is very, 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 very bad. Don't get me wrong. But after we invaded Iraq, that resulted in a power vacuum, which, we destabilized the place. We destroyed it. We ruined it. You will be hard-pressed to find someone that supports that because it was a horrible disaster. Once again, people were lied to. That's why you have to question this and hold people accountable while it's happening. This allowed Iran to expand influence in Iraq and strengthen its proxies. So this was horrible for everyone involved. So now we're into the 2000s and Iran is developing nuclear tech, allegedly. This is debated. They are supporting Hezbollah, Assad, the Houthis. These are all terrorist groups. Obviously, they hate us. They are genuinely bad. So yes, it's now in national security to make sure that people aren't committing terrorist acts. So Israel, of course, this whole time has been doing a bunch of things. I'm leaving out half of the things that Israel's doing, but they despise Iran. They are their arch nemesis, and they are causing mayhem and trouble everywhere. So Israel is conducting covert strikes. The U.S. is using sanctions and intelligence, and Iran is framing this as, look, you guys are still doing foreign intervention, get out of our face, leave us alone, which, fair, okay, but also don't commit terror acts. So, but is our CIA lying about it? We could go on forever. In the past 2 years, we've heard a lot about Iran again. So they've had a ton of protests. They killed a woman who was in custody. She violated their veiling laws, and then she died in police custody. It was horrific. Like I said, they're a horrible, oppressive regime. That's not up for debate. In June of 2025, Israel bombed Iranian nuclear sites. They are claiming and have claimed for decades that Iran is trying to arm itself and create nuclear weapons. Not necessarily true, and we have to take what Israel says with a grain of salt because they would like to completely wipe Iran off the face of the earth. And so they retaliated. The U.S. joined the operations, and there were 1,000+ dead. Iran expands its missile program and regional proxies. The Strait of Hormuz tensions threaten global oil supplies. Once again, we really care about oil. This is a big deal. We can't have that. So, of course, this entire time, there have been sanctions against Iran. So we have horribly sanctioned them ever since 1979. We never took the sanctions off. So we have basically banned any interaction with these people and buying their goods and buying their oil and all of that for decades now. So, of course, that's crushing their economy, that's causing problems, and they're suffering. So the people are suffering under the Ayatollah that they thought they wanted. And remember the liberal women who are now veiling themselves. They were veiling themselves as a sign of protest against the Shah. Well, the Shah's looking pretty good now because now they are required to wear their religious clothing. So now, of course, they don't want to wear the religious clothing. So typical liberal women, they want to do whatever the opposite is. But I do definitely feel for them because they are now super oppressed. Their rights are totally taken away. And it becomes a living hell to live in Iran if you are a woman. So they've been suffering. They are dealing with massive inflation. They are poor because of all of these things. So we fast forward to today and what's going on now. So all of these things have happened. They hate the West because of everything that we've ever done. They have trust issues. They do not like us. They despise us. But they brought in the Ayatollah to rule them. And of course, I didn't even bring up that Khomeini dies about 10 years into his reign. So he takes power in 1979, but he dies in about 1989. He dies a decade later. The next person who takes over as Grand Ayatollah, supreme leader of the country, their names are very similar. So you have Khomeini, who was the first Grand Ayatollah. And then you have Khamenei, who is, he was, I believe, the president of Iran at one point, and he is also a cleric, and he became the next Grand Ayatollah. So you have Khomeini is the old guy, died 1989. He was the one who presided over all of this stuff. And then you have Khamenei, who is still in power today. He's 86 years old now. He's very old. And he was slightly less strict. I mean, barely. But he was slightly less strict than his predecessor. But he's still horrible. He's an evil, horrible, awful man. And he's currently in power today. So, right now, under Khamenei, Iran has 50% inflation. They have currency collapse. They've been dealing with sanctions since 1979. They are living under strict Sharia law. And they've had protests multiple times. Like I said, in 2022, they had protests after that poor woman was murdered in police custody. Then in December 2025, which is when all of these things you're seeing on the news unfolded. And in the meantime, of course, Donald Trump is threatening them and, Netanyahu's visiting us every 5 seconds, demanding that we step in. And it's because Israel is egging the United States on to say, hey, they're going to have a nuclear bomb and then it's going to be your problem. When in reality, they likely do not have a nuclear bomb. They never did. They weren't getting close. But that was the only way that Israel could say, hey, you need to step in because we are basically slaves to Israel. This is the United States of Israel. And that's just how it is. And if you don't believe that, I urge you to look into literally any event that's ever happened and note Israel's participation and control. It is startling, frightening, horrifying. And that's why I don't support them or the genocide they are currently perpetrating on the Gazans. Like I said, Islam is a toxic, horrific religion, but you can't murder children. And I don't feel bad for saying that. You can't murder children. I'm never going to apologize. You're never going to convince me that what they're doing is acceptable. It's not. They need to stop now. But that leads to present day. So right now, the government is murdering the protesters. Everyone's in the streets. I mean, it's like a massive situation. It could be bigger than 1979. And they're marching in the streets. It started with the Bazaris who own the stores and the shops there. They've kind of been the litmus test for how people are feeling. And they've never really turned against the government before, but they finally were like, no, we're done. And they closed their stores because they can no longer afford to buy things to sell and everything's collapsing. So people are like, no, we're absolutely done. We can't handle this anymore. There has to be change. And so they've killed over, I believe, 550 people. They are on the state media. They are showing videos of these people in body bags, like hundreds of people in body bags. Children have been killed. It is a horrific situation unfolding there. And our president is currently, he's saying a bunch of things on X, and he is making statements on videos, and he is saying that I just hope the protesters in Iran are going to be safe because it's a very dangerous place to be right now. Again, I tell the Iranian leaders, you better not start shooting because we will start shooting too. This is a direct quote from a press conference that he just did. He has been encouraged by Netanyahu, our BFF, our greatest ally, who wants us to all go and die in Iran for reasons unknown. He's pretty much convinced everybody that if we don't step in this situation, I don't know what's going to happen to the United States, but I guess we better be involved. So horrible things are happening. I feel horrible for the protesters. It's not our fight. I feel terrible that they're suffering. It's not our fight. We cannot go and topple every regime that we just don't like or want their oil, or Netanyahu tells us to. We can't be doing that. You have to make your own call here on why this is happening, and you cannot just believe what you're being told. Many things can be true at once. There is nuance, believe it or not. And the nuance here is that you can hate Sharia law and the suffering that these people are going through. You can be furious that they're being murdered by their own government, and you also recognize that this is not where you live, and that our soldiers are not the police of the world, because there's a lot of horrible things going on right now. There are Nigerian Christians that are being mowed down on video, and you can literally go on X and watch Nigerian Christians being just shot and mowed down as they leave church. I'm talking men, women, and children. I've seen things that I wish I could unsee, and we are not doing much about that. So you have to ask yourself, why are we stepping in this particular conflict, and why is Israel so invested as well? This is their arch nemesis. Of course, they want us to step in. So you have to pay attention to why this is happening. So that's our story. That's how we got here today. That's what's unfolding. We have Donald Trump threatening to go in there, and he's going to do something bad, and World War III could come out. Remember that Iran has sanctions, so they are only allowed to sell their oil elsewhere. So China's buying their oil. So this is kind of, China and Russia are backing Iran. So that's why it would be like a World War III. This is a very bad thing that's happening right now. So pulling this all together, do you remember when I talked about that company in 1901 that was the gas company created by that British guy? Well, believe it or not, that company is still around today. Yes, they pulled out of Iran, but you may have gotten your gas with this company before. Guess, take a wild guess. This company is still causing problems, by the way. This company became BP. Yes, the company in question that started all of this drama became BP. So you might want to think twice before going to BP, because they are kind of troublemakers here. And of course, they also did their oil spill, so they just suck in general. So to recap, 1901 to 1951, Britain dominates Iranian oil, sparks nationalism. And then in 1951, Mossadegh, he was the prime minister. He nationalized the oil, and Britain was expelled, and they couldn't have that. So they brought in the CIA, and they brought in MI6, and we overthrew that guy, which we shouldn't have done that, because that was none of our business. But of course, we love to interfere where we are not wanted. And then in 1979, all foreign companies were expelled, and that was the revolution. Horrible, terrible, and everything sucked since 1979. And today, now Iran sells mostly to China, and BP doesn't even operate in Iran, obviously. So the takeaway from this is, if you've got oil, we're going to come and get it. Does this remind you of anything? Does this remind you of Venezuela, that we just witnessed Maduro being black bagged over oil? Yes. So we're still doing it. We're still up to our old tricks. And this leads to repeated cycles of conflict that are never ending. So that's what's happening today. I will say that I have seen blatant CIA interference going on with these protesters in Iran. So they want you to believe that this is all organic, that this is all just happening. But they have caught like AI generated images of people, teaching protesters what to say and do. They have found that there are probably agents on the ground in Iran, and they're trying to stoke tensions, and they are trying to make this happen so that there can be regime change. Not denying that Khamenei sucks, but this did not go well for us historically, and doing anything at the behest of Netanyahu is a very bad idea, since he's a war criminal. DeSantis just signed, he went to Israel and signed this, by the way. He signed an anti-Semitism law that you are not allowed to criticize Israel or say Netanyahu is a war criminal, or you could get expelled from your state-funded university. So that's fun. But I don't live there, and I think that Netanyahu is a war criminal. criminal. You can, in fact, be a Christian, a conservative, and think Netanyahu is a war criminal. It's amazing. I highly encourage all of you to look into what's happening in Gaza. I know it's hard because you don't want to be associated with liberals and they seem to be all free Palestine. But if you just look into it, you will, if you have a soul, you will see that what's happening there is unconscionable. It's gone too far. We are doing horrible things, and your tax dollars are being used to starve and kill children. So I highly encourage you to look into that. Look into Norm Finkelstein's book called Gaza's Gravediggers. He is a Jew, by the way, and he has been trying to sound the alarm on this forever. So I encourage you to read that, and you may change your mind. You may change your mind. I hope you do. If you watch this podcast, hopefully you don't support Netanyahu. If you do, it's not too late. You too can have a soul. So just saying. All right, well, that is our story today. That is why we were involved in Iran. I'm so sorry that my lips are drier than a freaking bone. I have been at a photography conference all morning, but I wanted to make sure to get this out there because I know a lot of people may not know the history of what's going on in this conflict, why it's in the news, why are we involving ourselves. And the short story is we shouldn't be, but we have been for decades. So with this knowledge, go out there, make your own opinions, inform others, research, do whatever you need to do. And now you know. I will see you next time on Partyless.
Let's do some updates about Israel and Iran and potentially the United States. On one side is the Lindsey Graham, John Bolton types, where they are actively calling for regime change. Here is Lindsey Graham. This is just lunacy. This kind of analysis is not helpful. This kind of approach, this kind of argument, it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons at this point. This is now that we want to go all in and take out the regime. It's time for us to close the chapter on the Iranian Ayatollah and his henchmen and start a new chapter in the Middle East. And that sounds good, doesn't it? But what have we learned when it comes to wars, and especially wars in the Middle East? What you draw up on a whiteboard rarely happens. What you think theoretically is going to occur, there might be unintended and unforeseen consequences. But also you have secular younger Persians. Who's going to run the country exactly, Lindsey Graham? This sounds like Hillary Rodham Clinton in Libya. So I'm pointing to the first extreme right now, the neoconservative extreme, the we must go take off the head of the snake right now. Play cut 285.
Be all in, President Trump, in helping Israel eliminate the nuclear threat. If we need to provide bombs to Israel, provide bombs. If we need to fly planes with Israel, do joint operations. But here's the bigger question. Wouldn't the world be better off if the Ayatollahs went away and replaced by something better? Wouldn't Iran be better off? It's time to close the chapter on the Iranian Ayatollah and his henchmen. Let's close that chapter soon and start a new chapter in the Mideast, one of tolerance, hope, and peace.
Okay, that sounds good, but that's pathologically insane. I'm sorry, it is. How do you know it's going to be better? Yeah, the Ayatollah is awful. But maybe he's one of the few guys that can keep that country together and not have a 90 million person civil war. Lindsey Graham is so consistently out of his mind, it's hard to even comprehend. Iran is hugely diverse. It is a massive country. Do the people agitating for war even know that? Because be clear, regime change is war. Just to understand, regime change is not like changing the head coach at the Chicago Bears. It's not how it works. It's not like a clean transfer. Typically in the Mideast, it's very messy, creates a quagmire, and then there is civil war.